Donald Trump has announced that trade talks with Canada are done. Dead in the water. Gonzo. No more. Canceling trade talks. And then after canceling trade talks with the Canadians and Mark Carney, Prime Minister, who won a shocking upset victory at the very last second as the polls reversed, largely because of Trump's comments about making Canada the 51st. I mean, Trump hoisted Mark Carney into the premiership in Canada. He has canceled negotiations, and now he's placing a 10% tariff on Canadian goods, another, not on top of the previous tariffs, another 10% tariff in retaliation for an ad featuring Ronald Reagan in his own words and nothing else. That might be a little confusing, considering Ronald Reagan is probably the most famous Republican of the modern era, outside of, going back all the way to Abraham Lincoln. But why would he increase tariffs for 10% for an ad of Ronald Reagan? President Donald Trump said he'll increase tariffs on Canada by another 10% in response to the Canadian anti-tariff ad that features former President Ronald Reagan. Trump announced the decision on Saturday in a Truth Social post, and which he called the ad fraudulent. The advertisement, which featured Reagan criticizing tariffs, aired during the Major League Baseball World Series game on Friday. Because of their serious misrepresentation of the facts and hostile act, I am increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% and above what they are paying now. Ontario Premier Doug Ford recently shared the ad on his X account. The minute-long ad included excerpts from Reagan's 1987 radio address to the nation on free and fair trade. After Trump said he would end trade talks with Canada over the ad, Ford said it would be paused after the weekend so negotiations could resume. The Trump administration has issued several tariffs on Canada, including a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. Okay. Also, on November 5th, the Supreme Court is going to be looking into the legality of these tariffs in the first place, which have been thrown into the air because he didn't go to Congress. He just said, emergency, tariff everything, Penguin Island to Canadian steel, everything must be tariffed. Which saying every country, like, we need to place a 10% tariff on Ukraine? What the hell is what are they taking from us? Like, that's a national security priority. If we don't put a 10% tariff on Ukraine, America's going to die. It's like, it's ridiculous. But right now, the tariffs are still in effect. We have to wait for November 5th for that Supreme Court decision. Mind you, the ad that is being discussed, when he says it's a misrepresentation, they just played this. That's all they did. They played the speech. And Ronald Reagan was very anti-tariff. Ronald Reagan was a very free speech president. But the problem is, Ronald Reagan is such an icon within the Republican Party that the idea that Ronald Reagan would have criticized Trump or disagreed with Trump or said Trump was wrong, considering Trump is now the modern icon of the Republican Party. He is the face of the Republican Party. He is the leader of the Republican Party. MAGA has taken over the Republican Party. The idea that the Republican Party's patron saint would tell Trump your policy is wrong, it's misguided, and would hurt the American people, that damages his image. I mean, let me play you parts of the ad. Here is his speech on tariffs and free trade. It's 5 minutes long. We'll play a segment of it. This is the speech that they sourced for the ad that played during the World Series.
My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda.
Could you imagine Trump talking like this? We were great allies, we work together, but we disagree specifically on the agricultural industry. We need to make sure that, the competition is fair and great. Could you imagine Trump talking like this? Just, man, the party's changed a bit.
As perhaps
Trump could have denied the AIDS crisis in a much more polite manner.
You've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors. Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take. And in a moment, I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. But the Japanese semiconductors were a special case. We had clear evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade. But you know, in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem, not begin a trade war. So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems and want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today...
So the reason, now some of you might be confused. It's like, wait, didn't that have to do with the crash and what does that have to do with the Great Depression? One of the reactions to the Great Depression, something that many economists and historians agree probably made it worse, was that a lot of countries engaged in protectionism after the Great Depression, including the United States, which many economists suggest actually intensified the crisis instead of alleviating it.
Economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period.
I promise I didn't watch this speech beforehand. I didn't know he was going to say that immediately after I just said it. If I did, I wouldn't have said it. I just let Ronald Reagan, the good man, say it for me.
Historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
This is probably true.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management.
Like this, I'm sorry, listen, is this particularly inflammatory? Is this worth a 10%? I mean, Trump said, my God, I can't believe this ad played displaying Ronald Reagan's, well, known and documented values. Guess I gotta put another tax on Americans. Goodness. I mean, that's what, again, the tariffs are a tax on Americans who buy products from that country. It hurts the country in question due to a decrease in business, but also hurts the people who have to import those things, either machine goods for their factories. I mean, there's a reason why, despite the fact that these tariffs are all meant to bring manufacturing back to the United States, Trump has seen a decrease in manufacturing jobs during his time in office. The last administration, we did see an increase. We did see an increase because they decided to pump money into a bunch of projects, try to work with the TMSC, you know, the Taiwanese semiconductor companies, try to bring that manufacturing back to the United States. Biden has always been somebody who was not really a huge fan of NAFTA. He wanted to bring manufacturing back to the United States, but his solution to it wasn't implement tariff here, implement tariff there. It was more, if we want to see American homegrown production in a certain area, we are going to put contracts out there, and we're going to put subsidies out there to incentivize the areas of production that we think are important for American defense contracting or of some national security issue. And that's why semiconductors was front and center, because we need it for, well, everything. Which even Ronald Reagan was talking about it back then.
People stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on
Dylan, watch the Ronald Reagan patriotic speech. That one is really good. This is not a Ronald Reagan glazing session. This is just an acknowledgement of what Ronald Reagan believed, and the fact that playing the most famous Republican modern president's own words is now a problem for Trump because of how far the party has transformed in the way it views trade.
Trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
So there it is in its entirety. I said maybe we wouldn't listen to the whole thing, but we listened to the whole thing. This is what got us to raise taxes because of this little speech being played. Here is Trump talking about the commercial.
I don't know. They cheated on a commercial.
They cheated on a commercial. Can somebody tell me what that even means? They cheat. What does that mean? They cheated on a commercial. Since when is there cheating in advertising? That's advertisement is to advertisement. That's not allowed. Stop that. Oh, no. Oh, no. The Republican Party, like all political parties, is always transforming. I don't see why Reagan's opinion matters that much. The Republican Party of 2025 is not the one of the 1990s, nor was the one of the 40s or the 1910s. That's such as the nature of politics. Okay, that's fair enough. I would say that an open acknowledgement of that transformation would be nice, though, because it seems that Donald Trump doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that they transformed. Look, I don't like where the Republican Party is right now on tariffs. The idea that the president can just unilaterally institute a tariff against any country at any time without the consultation of Congress, I think is clearly unconstitutional, as well as, I think, bad policy making. But that's not my problem. I mean, that's one of my problems, but that's not the main problem I'm talking about here. It's just the delusion. It's the delusion of, because Trump's message is make America great again. Now, what era of Americana are we going back to? I mean, he would talk about Reagan. They would talk about that era. I would hear people refer to that era as like a good era for America. No, that was our time. That was our prosperity. But if you're at one hand saying, we want to stride towards this new system, we're going to be pro-tariff, we're going to be anti-free trade, we're going to do this, you can't also get angry when somebody openly acknowledges the fact that Ronald Reagan wouldn't agree with you. That the people that you put on a pedestal are not just, political pawns by which you throw this way and that way. They were real people with real beliefs, real philosophies underpinning what they believed, and like real policy prescriptions. And so if you're going to transform as a party, that's fine, but you can't both be the free trade party and the tariff everything party. You can't be both at the same time. You cannot be the Ronald Reagan party and the Donald Trump party. And Trump wants both. And that's why I called it cheating. That's my problem with it.
I don't know. They cheated on a commercial. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, and they said he didn't. And I guess it was AI or something. They cheated badly.
It's AI. This is scary stuff, man. This stuff that's actually scary. There's real footage, real historical footage from 40 fucking years ago of Ronald Reagan speaking into the microphone, and all Donald Trump has to do to respond. He could have said Ronald Reagan was wrong. He could have said times have changed. He could have said, you know, I disagree. He could have said any number of things. But instead, it's not real. Cheating. I bet it's AI. Not AI. The speech exists. I bet it's in the National Archive somewhere. But it's AI. Just declare it's AI and move on. We're being taxed 10%. Anybody to buy any good from Canada is getting more taxes implemented on you because Trump thinks a real speech by Ronald Reagan is AI. Does he really think that, or is he just saying that to, bullshit people and get them off the case? Either way, it doesn't really change the policy effect, does it?
Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, and they said he didn't. And
Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. Okay.
Said he didn't. And I guess it was AI or something. They cheated badly. Canada got caught cheating on a commercial. Can you believe it?
Again, what is cheating on a commercial? He's in media. Like, his whole Trump's thing isn't real estate. Trump's thing wasn't the university. Yeah. Trump's thing wasn't that golf course in Scotland. Trump's thing always was branding. Trump Steaks wasn't like, oh my God, a fantastic steak. He put his big gold-plated name on it. And the way he would brand himself and brand Trump, and just by putting his name on it, putting his image next to it, he was able to build himself up. He was able to build up his brand, and he was very good at it. There's no cheating in branding. There's no cheating in advertisement. There's just winners and losers. And right now he sounds like an awful loser. Okay.